Hi, everybody. My presentation is going to be about food insecurity among breastfeeding mothers. The research question for my mini proposal is, what is the relationship between food insecurity and breastfeeding practices among low-income mothers, and how does food insecurity impact maternal and infant health? The hypothesis is that food insecurity negatively impacts breastfeeding practices of low-income mothers, maternal health outcomes, and infant health outcomes. The reason for this study is to see whether my hypothesis is correct or not. We want to determine how food insecurity affects breastfeeding mothers and how it affects their children. The findings of the study may provide interventions and policies that are aimed to improve food insecurity within this population. Food insecurity is a persistent issue that affects many worldwide, especially breastfeeding mothers who live in low-income households. So studies have shown that food insecurity is linked to inadequate nutrient intake, which affects breastfeeding practices, lactation duration, maternal and infant health outcomes. It's important to understand the underlying causes and consequences of it. In the article, Food Insecurity During Pregnancy and Breastfeeding by Low-Income Hispanic Mothers, it emphasizes that food insecurity acts as a barrier to successful breastfeeding practices. It can affect duration time and nutritional value. Another article that points out the impact of food insecurity in breastfeeding is relation between household food insecurity and breastfeeding in Canada. The study identifies the socioeconomic factors and breastfeeding rates. Food insecurity doesn't only affect breastfeeding practices, but the health of mom and infant. The author, Libby Salmon, covers a study that explores the intersection of food security and breastfeeding policy and how it affects infants and young children. These articles provide information on how food insecurity affects breastfeeding practices and the health outcomes of mom and baby, but there's still further studies to be done. Food insecurity has adverse effects on maternal health, infant development, and breastfeeding practices. Food insecurity during pregnancy can lead to various health complications for expectant and breastfeeding mothers, which include gestational diabetes, anemia, and inadequate weight gain. Food insecurity can limit a mother's ability to maintain a healthy and balanced diet, which is important for breastfeeding and milk production. Inadequate nutrition may affect the quantity and quality of breast milk, which causes breastfeeding to come to an early end. Food insecurity also creates stress for mothers who are breastfeeding, which can also affect feeding duration. The study will be a cross-sectional study which involves the collection of data at a single point in time to assess the relationship between the variables, which are food insecurity, breastfeeding practices, maternal health outcomes, and infant health outcomes. It will have a purposive sampling in order to ensure representation of diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. The study will also collect data on potential confounding variables such as maternal age, employment status, marital status, and household income. In order to do the study, we will need to have informed consent. So the participants know what the study is about, we will do screening, surveys, and interviews to collect the data needed as well. The sample will be low-income mothers who are currently breastfeeding or have breastfed their infants in the past year in the city of San Jose, California. Participants will complete a structured questionnaire that includes validating measures to assess food security status, breastfeeding practices, and socio-demographic characteristics. The inclusion criteria for participation will be low-income mothers ages 18 to 45 who have at least one infant which ages are 0 to 12 months. The exclusion criteria will be comprised of mothers without infants and mothers who do not self-identify as low income. The study will be taking place at San Jose State's Gender Equity Center since they provide services to lactating mothers, Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, and the WIC Center that is located in Santa Clara as well. In order to get my proposal approved, I will be applying to the San Jose State University Human Subjects Institutional Review Board. As mentioned before, we will be administering surveys and conducting interviews. The study will be the length of 12 months with trained data collectors. The data collection tools that will be used are surveys, questionnaires, the USDA Household Food Security Survey module, the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, and growth charts. So for the HFSM, it categorizes households into different levels of food security. Breastfeeding practices covers the different aspects of how a mother feeds her infant, including breastfeeding initiation, duration, exclusivity, and supplementation. For maternal health outcomes, will be assessed using instruments that measure postpartum depression, anxiety, stress levels, and overall well-being. For infant health outcomes, we will be assessing by using growth charts, a questionnaire on illness episodes, and a checklist for developmental milestones. And lastly, for the data analysis plan, the collected data will go through a process that involves checking for missing data, outliers, and data entry errors. It will also be analyzed using appropriate statistical methods, including descriptive statistics and regression analysis to examine the relationship between food insecurity, breastfeeding practices, and maternal and infant health outcomes. This proposed research project is feasible to me because I will be using questionnaires, surveys, and nutrient databases to assess dietary intake among low-income breastfeeding mothers. Food frequency questionnaires will be used. And here are my references. And that concludes my presentation.